All right, it's our pleasure to be joined by Bret the Hitman Hart. We are here at the March of Dimes Canada barbecue. And I imagine as a wrestler, Bret, you're always partial to the ribs at a barbecue.
No, I'm a hot dog guy.
Oh, yeah.
When you're going to go with a barbecue, you might as well go with hot dogs, especially when all they're serving is hot dogs.
Very true. You have now been with March of Dimes Canada, I guess going on 13 years now?
That sounds right.
Yeah, 2002, I guess, was when the stroke occurred, and it's been, a relationship with March of Dimes Canada that, I mean, this is obviously something very important to you, and making regular appearances on behalf of the group. Has it been something that was almost very much of a healing process with you, having this association so close after your stroke in 2002?
Well, being the spokesperson for March of Dimes on stroke recovery, I understand. I've been through it myself. The long road it is to try to find yourself getting back to normal. It's really tough to do, and it takes a lot of little people. When I say little, I mean just so many random people that are from physio people to the nurses to the doctors and the March of Dimes people. So many people all factor in on getting a good recovery, and it's a constant effort put in by a lot of people that make the difference. And I remember when I had my stroke, it was a very dark time, but I had good people around me that supported me and encouraged me every step of the way, and especially when it was the early stages of it. And I look today at how much I recovered and how grateful I am for all the good things that all those people did for me. This is my way of trying to give back.
You know, this has been a year where a lot of major names in the professional wrestling industry have passed away. Of course, it was Dusty Rhodes, Vern Gagne, and most recently someone very close to you, Roddy Piper. It was actually exactly a month ago that he passed away. I mean, over the past month, has it given you a lot of time to kind of reflect on just the relationship you two had, which was very unique in pro wrestling, of two people where a lot assumed that you two were family?
Well, Roddy's really a hard one. That's like losing a brother. I can't say I've got over yet. I got over it. If anything, I haven't even absorbed it yet. I find myself reaching for the phone all the time to give Roddy a call. He was more than so much more than any of the other wrestlers were to me. He was a guy that mentored me and helped me in the very beginning of my career. He gave me advice, back in a time when nobody was giving advice to me. Always good advice. And then not only that, when I wrestled him at WrestleMania 8, when I look back in those times, Mr. Perfect would be another one. There's a few guys that would reach down and help pull someone like me up to the next level. You can take your Jake Roberts and your Hulk Hogans and your, Ultimate Warriors and a lot of these guys that were big names back then, but they never did anything for me. And they never helped me. They never thought of helping me. And when they had a chance to help me, they never did. But Roddy Piper was a guy that looked after guys like me and a lot of the younger talent, and when the opportunity came for him to help make my career and pull me up to the next level, I owe a lot to Roddy Piper.
What was it that Roddy saw in you so much? Because that was at a time, I mean, Roddy didn't lose to anybody, but he saw that in you, and that was such a pivotal moment in your career in 1992 with that WrestleMania match.
Well, I think he connected with me because we were both Canadian boys that were in a sort of a tough man's business, and both had kind of, you have to make it in America, and he kind of took me under his wing a lot of the time. But I think I was an up and comer. I was starting to really make my own way in the wrestling, and mostly as a tag team wrestler. But I think people started to respect my work ethic and my work rate. And Roddy was one of those kind of guys that saw that I was trying to break into that next level really hard. But like I say, a lot of guys never stepped up. I look back on my career when I first won the title. And before I won the title, after WrestleMania 8 with Roddy, I was told that around that time that I'd be wrestling Jake Roberts at SummerSlam. Never happened. He got fired and had his drug problems, and he never contributed anything to help my career, which is a shame. And then Royal Rumble, after I won the title, I was supposed to wrestle Ultimate Warrior. I remember Vince tell me he was going to be a sharpshooter right in the middle of the ring. Never happened. He failed his drug test. Never handed anything down to anyone else. He left the company. All the guys that had broke their backs making him, but when it came time for him to make somebody, he never did. Hulk Hogan was another guy that was supposed to wrestle me the following SummerSlam. He, flat out refused to even work with me, period. And I just, so I remember the guys that reached down and did help me, from Mr. Perfect to Roddy, and so many guys that did work with me and helped me through my career, including Undertaker and Steve Austin and guys like that. But there was a lot of guys that were big names, and like I say, a lot of wrestlers helped make those guys. But when it came time for them to help make somebody else, look at their records. They never did anything for anybody but themselves.
And as you took that mentality into your career and your prime years, I mean, recently the WWE, they just put out a DVD collection on The Click, and they're very much a group now that is glorified all these years later. But you were there in the trenches, having to deal with this on a daily basis. And it appears you were the wrestler's wrestler that seemed to really stand up. And this was a very divisive group at that time, who today, I mean, they're largely praised.
Praised by who? Triple H?
I think a lot of the audience, just looks at it at a time when they don't know all the intricate details of what went on at that time.
Literally a cancer in the dressing room, all of them, and I think they're all. I don't doubt that Shawn Michaels is sorry for a lot of that kind of behavior. Kevin Nash was a great wrestler and a good guy, but I don't think he can be that proud of that association. It was a cancerous environment in the dressing room with those guys, and they certainly did more negative than positive harm to the business. Scott Hall, all you have to do is look at him. He's a train wreck with his own life, and he was a malcontent, or a guy that, when you were close to him long enough, you started to feel the same way he did. You just felt so self-destructive and unhappy with your life and your job and everything. He was a guy that was infectious with his bad sort of moods and bad unhappiness in his own life that would spread to all the other wrestlers. And I'm glad I'm not remembered for that kind of stuff. I remembered. I think if you talk to different wrestlers from that era, the Savio Vegas and the those kind of wrestlers that were on my cards, they're all pretty proud of how I conducted myself and how I related to them, and how I may have been the top guy, but I didn't act like a superstar, not to my friends and not to my peers.
Another DVD release the WWE is going to be coming out with shortly is on your late brother, Owen Hart. Is that project all complete now? Have you sat down with them and done interviews for the project? What can you tell us about it?
I'm looking forward to it, but I'm not really optimistic that it's going to be a great job. Martha handcuffed them so much, Martha, the widow of Owen, that really, I don't know if they're even allowed to use any pictures from the past. It was very, it's a poorly done DVD because of all the restraints and the limitations that Martha put on it. And to me, that's such a lousy thing to have happen. That Martha, I think Owen would turn in his grave if he knew how much trouble Martha's gone to erase his career and to make sure that nobody enjoys anything about his career today. It's a bitterness and selfishness that I can't stand by anymore. I think Martha's taken the wrong approach, and she should understand that, we all miss Owen. I lost a brother, I lost a great friend, and maybe one of my closest people that I knew on this earth. And I want to celebrate his career. I want to watch his matches back, not just with me, but with everybody he worked with. And his time with WWE, they got so much footage and so many great memories with Owen. And here she is standing in the way of that and saying nobody can see these videos, no one should see anything that's it brings back any of his career.
So WWE footage, they can't use his matches in the WWE?
They can do select things, but they couldn't use any pictures from his childhood. They couldn't use any pictures. They couldn't use anything from Stampede Wrestling. They couldn't. They had so many restraints. Even the interviews, the questions that they did with me were so bullshit. And the whole thing was so bullshit that, sure, there's an Owen Hart DVD, but it's the shits. It's not the real DVD. It's not like the the best there is, best there was, the best there ever will be DVD that I did that captured so many of my great matches, or as many as I could, and I had a hands-on sort of involvement in it, and it was a great project. And I was, at that time, it was a big door to be opened. I was so glad to bring my career back and let people see what I was so proud of and what I fought for that day in, say, Montreal, and what I lost. And so when they allowed me to do that DVD, I wanted to be the best DVD that there ever was. And I think Owen's DVD, I think WWE maybe had good intentions, but I'm not very impressed with the quality that it's going to be. I haven't seen it. I'm optimistic. No, I'm not optimistic, but I'm hoping that it'll be better than I think. But I could tell by the questions that they asked me and the interview that they did with me that it was a very short version of, and a very carefully worded questions with bullshit answers, and I'm not really gonna hold out hope that it's gonna be as great as it should be, and I feel bad because that's Martha's fault.
Do you know if there was ever it was reached out, the idea of we're going to sell this DVD, we're going to donate proceeds to the Owen Hart Foundation, anything like that? Because I think many people are sympathetic to Martha losing her husband here, and is certainly a fan base that wants to see this.
I don't think that was ever an issue. I'm sure that the royalties would go to Martha anyway, but she wouldn't have any part of it, of anything. It's funny, Martha got the $18 million settlement and has now gone to school in Oxford, England or somewhere, and has got a degree in psychology, but she should analyze her own self and ask herself why she's so cold-hearted and selfish to want to lock up all the great memories that my brother Owen has that are locked up in warehouses and studios in WWE in Connecticut that they're not allowed to use, or they're not using because they're trying to respect her wishes, which is absolute bullshit.
Just before we end off here, a question I've always wanted to ask you. Years ago, you had written about a past altercation with Jack Briscoe. What was the rift between yourself and Jack Briscoe? Because I think a lot of people on the surface would assume the two of you very much would have appreciated each other's in-ring style, but there was always some personal issue that I think people weren't quite aware of.
I never had any issues with Jack Briscoe.
You were fine with Jack Briscoe?
Fine with Jack Briscoe.
Was it problems with Jerry Briscoe that?
Well, Jerry Briscoe was the mastermind of the screw job itself, but I've been on good terms with Jerry Briscoe for a few years now, and a lot of anger that I may have had towards Jerry Briscoe and even Pat Patterson wrongfully for a long time, or Earl Hebner. You can't blame those people for what happened. They're just doing their job the same way I was, and if you're gonna point fingers, or you point right at the people that were directly involved. Even Shawn Michaels has kind of washed his hands of it today and said, "Hey, I didn't do anything except for what I was sort of told to do." The screw job was a direct result of Triple H and Vince McMahon, and Triple H was probably the biggest, the most responsible party of the whole bunch. He's never apologized for it. I don't expect that he ever will. I don't know that he rightfully could apologize for it. It turned out to be nothing but gravy for him ever since, So it's just one of those things. You got to do what you got to do. I did what I had to do. I know I can look in the mirror and say I got all my integrity. I was legally in the right, morally in the right, emotionally in the right. Everything I said and did was right. If you look at CM Punk, you look at everything that happened to him, he didn't fall for their lies the way I did, and accepted. The truth about the Survivor Series is that I didn't even need to show up that day. I already fulfilled my contract. I was required to work 175 dates that year. I was already at about 210 shows that year. I'd worked about 30 days more than I was supposed to. Me showing up in Montreal for the Survivor Series was out of respect for the title and the wrestlers and the company and the things that I'd done and the fans that had been there for me. I never wanted to leave the company in the first place. I was pushed out, squeezed out, lied to, manipulated. and for them to, after all the hard work and years and sacrifice that I gave to that company, to screw me over in front of my family and my friends, it's a reflection on them. It's not I've been a sort of beloved hero in Canada ever since then. So it's always people know what happened. I know what happened. The Wrestling with Shadows documentary captured, for the most part, the whole thing anyway. But you see Triple H sort of hiding away and cowering from my ex-wife and sort of denying that he had any involvement. There you go. That's your integrity. That's your piece of shit right there.
Last question. You did bring up CM Punk. Are you going to watch his debut when he does fight for the UFC? And I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you always saw a lot of yourself in CM Punk, and he was certainly someone that looked up to you.
I'd be happy to watch. I think he's, it's a very tough business, tough game. I got a lot of respect for all the UFC fighters and the dedication and the sacrifice that they make to be fighters. But I'm much more proud that I have made a living pretending to hurt my friends rather than actually hurting my friends. But I respect what they do and the courage that it takes to go in the ring and fight that way. And I'm a big fan of UFC. I'm glad I watch it from the outside looking in. But I'd also say with Punk that he's, from what I've known of him, and I know him reasonably well, he's a guy that doesn't make dumb moves, and he doesn't make weak promises. And he's a guy that's got a lot of focus, a lot of dedication, and if he wants to go into UFC, I'm sure that if he believes he's a threat, then I'm willing to believe that he's a threat too, and especially for that first fight. I'd love to be there in support of him. I know I will be if it's a pay-per-view, and I'm sure it will be. I'll be there to back him up.
Well, Bret, we always appreciate the time with you. You can follow this man at Bret Hart on Twitter, and for more information on March of Dimes Canada, you can go to marchofdimes.ca.